listening to the Three Seeds Podcast, a show about native plants in the Midwest. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Elizabeth, and we've been walking around parks and gardens together for years.
In each show, we share interesting and fascinating facts about native plants.
Why 3 seeds? Well, we believe it takes 3 seeds to germinate great ideas.
We're 2 of the 3 seeds, and the third may very well be a plant, a person, or a cultivar.
Oh, no.
Just kidding. Hey, everyone. Here we are, our second episode.
Welcome back. You're troopers for joining us again.
Yeah, that's right. This is the Three Seeds Natives podcast, this time on location in McDonald Woods. This is not your Ronald McDonald Woods. This is your Mary McDonald Woods, by the way, in the Chicago Botanic Garden. We're super excited because today we're here with Gretel Kiefer of the Chicago Botanic Garden.
Hi, everyone. I manage Plants of Concern, which is a community science rare plant monitoring program here at the Botanic Garden. We connect people to plants, getting people outside to monitor rare plants for the health of people and our native habitats.
So I guess the first question that springs to mind is, what is a rare plant?
Well, let's see. I can easily answer that with a plant that is not common, but really I could also get all geeked out and talk about the types of rare plants that we have. We basically describe rare plants by their local abundance. You know, if you find a cluster, how many are there typically? Or the distribution of the species. Is it widely distributed over a large area, like from coast to coast, or only found in a narrow range, like only in northeastern Illinois? And also how tied it is to the habitat where it grows. Can it occupy multiple habitats, or is it a habitat specialist, only occurring in a rare habitat? All those things together kind of help us define the types of rare plants that are out there.
So it's not only about its frequency, it's about all those other things too.
Yeah, so you can have rare plants that when they occur, they're like thousands of them, but they only occur on, the side of a cliff. And you don't see the sides of cliffs that often, so those can be rare species.
Does that mean it's rare to humans or rare, like when you talk about the side of a cliff, it's not rare to dwelling animals, but it's just rare to us?
That's right. So you could have like an animal that dwells on the side of a cliff and it sees that plant all the time, but that animal might be a habitat specialist too.
Rare plants and rare animals coming together
Yeah.
on sides of cliffs.
And then is there a component of this where you're also focused on native rare plants? Is that part of this?
Yes, only native plants we basically tie a person who's interested in getting out in nature to a known location of a rare plant to monitor. And I can go into what monitoring
tell us
is.
more about monitoring, because although that sounds kind of simple, it's not that simple.
It's not that simple. So monitoring, you have to be at a location at a time when you're going to easily see the species that you're interested in. You can't go out in June and expect to find a plant that flowers in late August very easily. So we go out when a plant is in full bloom to be able to identify it. And when we go out, we count the number of individual plants, assess whether they're flowering or not flowering, and also we look at what threats those plants may face, like are they being browsed by deer? Are there invasive species encroaching on the rare plant habitat? And we report that information back to land managers so they can better manage their natural areas.
And so, why is it important to even monitor rare plants in the first place? Like, what does that tell us?
I like to think of rare plants as just indicators of high quality habitat, and they're a good excuse to get people outside because people are excited to see things that don't occur very often. So we are looking at, orchids that grow in Illinois. A lot of people have no idea that there are native orchids in Illinois. So it's a great opportunity to get people engaged. Rare plants, I see them as just the means of getting people motivated to get outside and monitor. And in return, we learn about the habitat, and we can better manage the habitat where many species thrive, not just rare plants.
To me, it's an exciting idea that citizens can be stewards of our land and get engaged with the land and be a part of restoring it if it needs to be. How do people get involved?
Yeah, that's a really great point, because in northeastern Illinois, in the Chicago region, we have a history of community stewardship, like people getting out and doing the restorations in our forest preserves. And a lot of times there are people interested in restoration, and when they go out and cut buckthorn or remove invasive species, they start noticing rare species and become rare plant monitors. And vice versa, if you start monitoring rare species and notice that they're being invaded by garlic, mustard, buckthorn, like, you become a steward of the land and join like local groups that are doing restoration.
As someone who's pulled a fair amount of garlic mustard in the past year, I have a personal beef with garlic mustard, I have to say. I really appreciate that. And I think the other thing I want to understand is, like, in terms of biodiversity, like, what's happening when you do restore a habitat versus when you're not? What's the role of the rare species in that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So typically when we have non-native species invading a natural habitat, we lose diversity. They take over, and we see those rare plant species numbers decline. They can become locally extinct. So that's where rare species come into the picture as sort of the telltale of habitat quality and a way to get people excited and get out and remove the invasive species that are causing that decline.
But, like, what does it mean for the rest of the system? Like animals, birds, insects?
Yeah, you had also mentioned something about how this can affect human health too. Did you say that, or did I hear that wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, getting outside and exploring nature, making observations, just being in a natural area, seeing colors, breathing fresh air, that's all part of human health and restoring our mental health. I often take a walk when I'm, need to sort of get de-stressed. So also talking about those rare species as indicators. So rare species can play an interesting role in, even if they're not common, it's a whole network in an ecosystem where if you lose rare species, you are losing the interactions with pollinators and insects, specialized insects that they support. So it's a cascading decline.
So curiosity about, so you're a scientist, right? Which means you went to school for quite a while. But like, what led you to even go down that route to become a botanist? Is there something that you feel like was a starting point for you?
Yeah. I come from, I'm from the Chicago suburbs, but not the typical upbringing. We had goats and beehives. My mother was interested in native plants, so we would go, on road trips and stop at prairies along the way and explore natural areas. My parents would wake me up in the middle of the night to hear hooting owls, take me bird watching. So I was outdoors all the time. And I think that really sparked an interest in native plants. I graduated from college with an interest in art and biology and thought I would be an illustrator, and realized that sort of like these very detailed illustrations were kind of confining, and I wanted to spend more time outside. I pursued a master's degree in native plant conservation, and that's kind of led me to where I am today.
Can you take us back to the goats for a second? So what was that like growing up with goats? And was this just in your backyard? Like, how much land did you have in the suburbs?
We had 2.5 acres in Glenview, so not your typical suburban house. My kindergarten class took a field trip to our house, which was a log house. So I often got questions like, do you have indoor electricity? Do you have running water? Which we did both have. Indoor toilets, running water, electricity. But parents that were interested in gardening, we grew a lot of our own food, did a lot of preserving food, canning, extracting honey from the beehives, sort of developed that get outside and do it yourself attitude.
Yes, and I do recall you mentioning using your mother's chainsaw just in past conversations with you, which I feel like it's not that common.
But maybe it can become more common, hopefully.
Exactly.
My mom, she died within the last year, but up until the time of her diagnosis, she was outside cutting buckthorn with her electric chainsaw. And she was a great example of an environmental steward, sharing her love of native plants and restoration.
Were your parents, were they a product of their parents, as it almost seems like you are, or were they kind of a time, kind of in that like 1970s, 80s, earthy?
Yes.
Did they break away from business majors, or?
Yes. So my parents were both involved in a family company, which is swimming pool supplies, but in their home life, they were totally different than their parents.
And it's cool they shared that together.
Yes.
That was obviously a shared passion of theirs.
Yes. But I should say, like, getting outside and being active, it like runs through the generations. But yeah, they definitely sort of harnessed that earthiness.
Yeah. I would like to get into your head a little bit as someone who is doing this in their workday life. I just want to know, like, on average in a given day, like, how much time are you spending thinking about plants?
Oh, that's a great question. I how do I quantify that? A lot. But I should say I'm a numbers person too. Like, we collect a lot of data, So I'm a database manager. I'm crunching numbers, looking at the computer a lot in the off season when I'm not outside looking at plants. I'm looking at the data that we collected on plants.
And is it that you really like numbers, or is it also that the data is telling you a story? Is that captivating to you, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Doing data analysis is part of that process to understand trends and share that information with the land managers who are involved in our natural areas.
And then, I have another question for you. Is there anything about what you do that either you think people might find surprising, or that you have found surprising?
Yeah, people might find it surprising that, I enjoy coding in SQL and doing analysis in R, and developing efficient workflows for data processing. So I am, a data nerd as well as a plant nerd.
That's cool.
Double whammy. I was kind of wondering, having had the pleasure of going on a few walks with you, describe the feeling when you come across a rare species that you weren't necessarily looking for. Like, what happens?
What happens, it doesn't have to be a rare species, but just like a species that I'm familiar with or don't expect to see. Like, I think you're talking about walking down a ravine and seeing a rare honeysuckle, Lonicera dioica, the red honeysuckle, and I got super excited because we track certain species, and I have a database of their locations, and then find them in places that I didn't know they were still occurring. So it's just like a instant, like, whoa, this is awesome. Yeah, I guess it's just a shot of adrenaline.
That's what it seemed like.
Yeah, at the risk of sounding sentimental, and as somebody who finds herself talking to plants, like, I don't just say, "Oh, that's a lovely plant." I say, "Oh, hi." I'm just like, "Well, you're lovely." Do you feel like you have a relationship with or to plants?
Yes. I talk to plants too, and I know a lot of people that do. And, it's like greeting a species that's, just started flowering for the season, and you're seeing it again, and it's like, oh, it's so good to see you.
Yeah.
That whole cycle of spring and blooming, like, always sort of amazes me that it keeps going. I know it's like kind of cliche or just like, but yeah, I am fascinated by seasons and just seeing species again year after year. Also, we do a lot of seed collecting, just looking at seeds and imagining the plant that they become. That still is just mind-boggling to me.
It is ridiculous. Like, some of the tiniest seeds produce ginormous plants, for example. The other thing, like, I really like that question because spring is like a charming time, because you have all these little like ephemeral spring flowers that pop up. They're not like towering plants. They seem kind of like cozy in there, where they are. It's kind of comforting in a way.
Yeah. That repetition.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you think you'd like to share with the 3 listeners of this podcast?
I have one story that I'd like to share. I have the luxury of having a yard with sun in the front and more shade in the back. So I have prairie plants and woodland plants. Just describing relationships with plants a little bit more. I have an attachment to species like cutleaf toothwort and trillium that came from my grandmother's yard. And so I feel like it's sort of a living scrapbook, that collection of things that have been passed down, and also, new things that I've added. And just this past summer, I found a Prenianthes alba, which is the white rattlesnake root. And it was a plant that my mom had given me maybe 4 years ago that kind of disappeared until this season when it bloomed. And I just was amazed that like this gift that she had given me, like I'm now celebrating.
Yeah. Does it feel, it's like a little return. It's like a piece of her returning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So sweet. So now we would like you to participate in something that we planned to do. We did it once in our first episode. Now in episode 2, the plant reveal. Do you have a plant that you'd like to share?
I do.
Awesome.
My plant reveal is witch hazel, Hamamelis virginiana. It's an understory, multi-stemmed shrub. And I thought it was like a great species to reveal this at this time of the year. It's really unique because it's flowering now. When
Right.
other species are losing their leaves, witch hazel has its leaves turning yellow, and intermixed with that are the little yellow flowers that have these very crinkly, strap-like petals that actually change shape with the temperature. So they sort of like curl up when it's cold and extend and burst open when it's warmer, I learned, which is really cool. And they are a good source of nectar for pollinators and insects late in the season. And they right now, if you walk by a witch hazel, there's this intense citrusy smell, which is really awesome. I often smell them before I see them. And I learned that the witch in witch hazel doesn't come from anyone making magic, but that word comes from Old English witch, W-I-C-H-E, which means lively or bendy, and sticks of the witch hazel plant were used as dowsing sticks.
Oh, really?
To find underground. Have you ever tried to find
find
underground sources of water?
Definitely. When I was little, I was stomping around the woods with sticks. Yeah,
Well,
but I didn't.
did you
know
ever
about the witch
find
hazel.
any?
It was kind of in the same par of the Ouija board in terms of, did I do it? Was it real? Is it my hands speaking? It seemed like something's happening.
But we can assume that worked for people, right? For
Yeah.
finding their wells. And
Maybe, yeah. Anyway, the wood, I guess, is bendy, and it was a good stick to use for dowsing.
Do you happen to know the Latin of that word? What the Latin is referring to?
The genus name Hamamelis refers to things occurring at the same time, like the flowering and being in flower and seed at the same time. Actually, the capsules, the seed capsules, are pretty cool because they're explosively dehiscent, which means they burst open with such force that, the seeds are tossed sometimes 30 feet from the plant.
Wow. Wow.
Have
That's
you seen
propulsion?
Can you see footage of that?
I don't know if there's footage, but
Slow-mo.
if you collect the
Wow.
fruit and put them in a paper bag, you can actually hear them exploding. And if you don't put them in a paper bag, you could probably see them.
Yeah. Can I ask you kind of a basic question? If something is flowering, it's like a midpoint of its life. in a way. But when you're saying it's flowering and seeding at the same time, I always thought of like, well, that plant's going to seed. Like it's at the end of this really productive, not life cycle, but it's at the end of this.
Yeah.
So it's really odd that they're doing both at the same time, this kind of.
You know, the two stages overlap, and in witch hazel it's even more unique because, you know, it's blooming in the fall and pollinated in the fall, but there's a delayed, it's getting very in depth, delayed fertilization.
Oh.
So it doesn't actually get fertilized and start developing the seed until the spring.
Oh.
And then, you know, the dispersal happens later than that, you know, when.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
okay.
I thought it was jet propulsing seeds while it was flowering right now.
It can be. Yeah,
This is a tricky
Yeah.
this is a tricky plant here.
yeah. And it has very low success in, you know, that because there's that delayed fertilization, a lot occurs over the winter. So only a very small percentage of the flowers form capsules with seed.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you for that reveal.
Yeah. Can I ask one more question about it? This might be maybe outside of your realm, maybe, but is witch hazel an herb that people use?
Oh yeah. So it's a woody shrub, but I'm glad you asked that question because it's very important for medicinal uses, and it's not an herb, like people don't pick the leaves and use it, but extraction or distillation from the witch hazel leaves and bark are used as skin.
Like a tonic or something, right?
Yeah, like it has anti-inflammatory, astringent qualities. So you'll see it all in pharmacies.
Okay.
Wow. That's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that one.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you so much for your time and taking us to this really beautiful place right now with all the changing colors and chipmunks chirping and geese honking.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. It's really fun.
Time to sign off, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.